esteemed panellists, some of whom are currently fighting their way through security, but they will be joining us. We will be joined by Lord Glasman, obviously the founder of Blue Labour. We will also be joined by Wain, who is Executive Director of Politics at the Tony Blair Institute. And to my right, these two lovely gentlemen, we have Alex Ballinger, the MP
Halesowen.
the MP for Halesowen, and we have David Burton-Sampson, who is the MP for Southend West, and Leigh. So we're here today to talk about the sin tax. The panel is Beyond Revenue, Can Labour Make Sin Taxes Fairer for Consumers and SMEs? The sin tax is, I'm Torrin McLaughlin and I will be your chair. I work at the British Beer and Pub Association, so we come across sin taxes quite a lot, especially when it comes to alcohol duty. Sin taxes are generally perceived to be one of the sort of sneaky tools in the arsenal of policymakers. They're controversial to some. Supporters will say that they improve public health and that they fund the NHS, and then critics, or sceptics I should say, will say the outcomes aren't as strong as they should be, it's an overstepping of the state, and they disproportionately affect lower income families. So, can Labour reimagine these taxes to better support public health and economic justice? Is it possible to curate an environment of prevention, protection, and also affordable pleasure? And perhaps most importantly, should you hate the sin and not the sinner? Alex, we spoke a little bit outside about sin taxes. And I know one of the things for you that has come up quite a lot is gambling. It's something you're very passionate about. Would you say that sin taxes in your patch have disproportionately, whether that's on alcohol or sugar or gambling, have they impacted SMEs at all? What's been your experience with that?
Thank you. I'll get a bit closer to this microphone. So I of course, as the MP for Halesowen, we have lots of pubs, lots of other hospitality sectors that are affected by alcohol taxes more than others, and I think one of the big drivers in the cost of living crisis is how much does a pint of beer cost, or other types of alcohol, and that is something that's certainly on the mind of publicans in Halesowen. But something that I've been doing lots of work on over the last 6 months or so is gambling taxation. So people often think about sin taxes, they think about tobacco, they think about alcohol, and I'm sure the other panellists will talk more extensively about those. But gambling is also a public health problem. Yeah. So lots of people that you meet that are compulsive gamblers face all sorts of what I call gambling harms, mental health issues, debt, family problems, and in the worst case, suicide. And in fact, there is a nice stall in the Labour Party conference hall from Gambling with Lives. They represent parents of people that have killed themselves through gambling addiction, and these awful types of things. Now, there's something that's being debated in government right now, whether or not we should raise gambling taxes in order to pay for some of the harms, some of the side effects, in the same way that tobacco and alcohol are taxed in order to fund the NHS. And I think just like alcohol, gambling, there are different forms of gambling. Some are more or less beneficial in your constituency, some are more or less harmful in terms of their addictive qualities, and some the public like and some the public are not quite so keen on. So you would say something like the National Lottery or bingo or horse racing, quite traditional, there has a social value, it can generate jobs in a particular community. These are the sorts of gambling that have relatively little harm as well, and actually add a lot more to the local community. But there are particularly online forms of more addictive, high-paced online slots, online casinos, basically virtual forms of machine gaming you might see in an adult gaming centre that are extremely addictive, and there's a lot of statistics on this. They may be 10 times more addictive than going to the horse races, for example. Generate enormous profits for an industry, and you can base a lot of the staff that works on these online sites offshore. So many of the gambling companies will have their headquarters in Gibraltar or the Isle of Man, so they're not paying corporation tax in the UK. They're buying algorithms from overseas, and they're not really creating very many jobs in an area, but they're producing a lot of harm. So I think when you have these differentials, different types of gambling, we should be looking at a tax system that taxes the more harmful, less productive forms in your constituency a bit more?
So
there's a proposal going on around
sorry
that.
to interrupt. So should sin taxes then be ring-fenced to combat the harms of whatever, if we're talking about gambling, should all of that money, that revenue, instead of the government profiting from it, should it be that those taxes go straight back into the support systems for those who do struggle?
So when you speak to Treasury about these sort of things, they hate the word hypothecation, which means exactly this, to ring fence, because as we all know, it's very difficult to understand where the costs and the prices go on these types of things. But I think you can imagine in your mind the costs of the various different types of sins that we're talking about, and how funding the NHS, which is an enormous public good, is quite beneficial, even without going down to like that particular type of hypothecation.
Okay, thank you, Alice. David, so you've campaigned across a lot of policy areas, mainly focusing sort of on accessibility, and I suppose one of the key criticisms of sin tax is that it disproportionately affects lower income individuals or lower income families and small businesses. So I just want to kind of get your view on sin tax as a theory more generally, and then also about in your patch, what have you experienced with this?
Yeah, quite right. Let me just make sure. Can everyone hear me okay? Good. Yeah, so quite right. I've got similar views to Alex on his views around gambling. In fact, we signed a letter together which we've sent to the Chancellor around how we can potentially adapt the tax system around online gambling in particular. You know, ultimately this is all about preventing harm to individuals. And sin taxes, if used in the right way, serve a purpose in preventing that harm.
The Betting and Gambling Council's intervening.
Absolutely.
They're shutting you down.
Yep. Okay. Shall I swap microphones?
Perhaps not.
Is it my one? Just general? No, it's general system. Fine.
You can shout.
I'll shout. There we go. So, to me, it's about getting the balance right between disincentivising people to do something, whether that be to eat a certain product or to use a certain service, or such as gambling, or to smoke, or whatever it might be, but also then using education to prevent them going down that route in the first place. And I know you talked about not ring fencing funds, but for me, it's really important that taxes that are used, these sin taxes that are taken, are reinvested into public health and into preventative services. You know, the 10-year plan for the NHS that we saw released a couple of months ago, talks very much about sickness to prevention, moving from sickness to prevention. And if this is done in the right way, that is key. It's one of the ways to look at how we prevent people going down a route in the first place, prevent people from getting sick in the first place. Now, by helping people eat healthy, helping people not smoke, helping people avoid gambling, that's going to help them have a healthier lifestyle and ultimately relieve the pressure on the NHS. So, you know, I'm really keen on some of the other stuff the government's doing as well beyond taxes, because it's not just about taxes. They are just one tool that they can use in terms of prevention. So if you look at the restriction on vape branding and sales of vapes, and if you look at the banning of junk food advertising close to schools and to children directly during children's TV time and stuff like that, there's a range of tools we can use. I think sin taxes are one of those tools, but we have to use a whole range of tools to start to really address some of these issues that are ultimately damaging the health of the nation.
Thank you, David. And as you've seen, we have been joined by Lord Glasman, the founder of Blue Labour. So, Maurice, hello. You've long argued politics should be rooted in place, in community, in work. So how do you see sin taxes, this sort of top-down behavioural enforced nudge by the Treasury and by the government, how do you see that being a hindrance to sort of working class communities?
Yeah, so first of all, good to be here. Apologies for being late. I forgot what Labour Party conference was like. There's actual politics involved, so real apologies for that. Also want to say that I really support SMEs and real energy in the economy. So it's a difficult one here. So I smoke and I drink and I like doing both with other people. You know, that's part of my life. Ever since I was a student, standing outside libraries smoking, you meet the best people, you know. And so I am very concerned about a moralistic approach to all this. I completely accept the taxes on drinking. I'm in favour of the legalisation of marijuana and then the tax receipts that come from that. I'm very concerned that pubs are being shut down. Local pubs are the heartbeat of a community. I'm very, very concerned about that, and I'm very concerned that all we think about is money and tax receipts in the NHS. I think that there has to be very drastic state reform. I think state expenditure has to drop as a percentage of expenditure. I think that AI is a huge asset in this. I think that AI can lead to a real transformation of the state, and we're in danger of getting into a situation where all we think about is living longer without thinking about the meaning of life and what that's about. So it's a complicated situation. I think that we're in danger of becoming a Puritan party. I think we're in danger of becoming an authoritarian party. I've developed, I'm wearing one, the lanyard class, you know, that we all have to obey the directives. A great part of life is getting into trouble and making friends, and we forget we just are trying to control people. So I'm in favour of incentives to virtue, giving people incentives to virtue, and often that means lower tax on entrepreneurs, lower tax on businesses, and really rethinking how we live. So I am in favour of taxation. I'm in favour of taxation on smoking and what you were saying about prevention, but I am concerned that we are forgetting about the meaning of life, which is about love, about adventure, about friendship, and the culture of friendship, the ability to talk with others, be with others, and to some extent rebel. I mean, we are becoming a very anti-rebellious party at a time when there is a mass rebellion. You know, that's the politics we're in, is a mass insurgency, and we are in danger of being the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, or we're in danger of being the Puritans who declare war on speech, on free speech. I think that's a terrible thing.
In what way are we declaring war on free speech, Maurice?
Well, for example, when I was at university, I was called in, so we were called to a meeting. This is just a story of what that meaning is for me. And we were told that we had to show an awareness of and respect for diversity in everything that we taught. And I said, well, in South Africa, there's tens of thousands of men who think that if you rape an underage virgin, it cures you of AIDS.
I think we might be digressing slightly.
No, I'm just giving an example.
My point was that wasn't the Labour Party, Maurice. That was the
well, that was pretty much the Labour Party in action, in terms of not trying to make it illegal to dissent from a progressive worldview, and saying that
I would love to speak about this afterwards, gentlemen, over a pint and a cigarette.
Can I reply just on the
okay, a couple of minutes to you, but then we have to move on to policy mechanisms that we use.
On the point of choice, I agree with you, Maurice, that we should have the ability to make choices in life as to what we want to do. I absolutely think a government's responsibility is not to shut you down on smoking or on drinking or whatever it might be, but you need to be aware and I like a drink. I enjoy a drink. I don't smoke anymore, thank goodness, because it was damaging my health.
Well done.
And you know, I knew it was damaging my health, and I was a 20-a-day person. But I, through education, realised that I had to stop smoking. I drink, and I know the consequences of if I drink too much, but that's my decision to drink too much if I drink too much. Not saying I drink too much all the time. But, you know, I think that you know the consequences of what you do, but your actions could then be a drain on the state because of what you do, and therefore you're going to cost more to the state, and therefore you should technically have to pay for that. And you pay for that through potentially the sin taxes on those harmful things that you choose to do.
It's an interesting point. Dominic Lawson was in the Times this morning talking about this very topic, and he actually quoted a report from 2017 from the Institute of Economic Affairs, which suggested that from smoking, the government, when you take into account revenue from taxing cigarettes, and when you take into account the likelihood of early deaths, not that I'm promoting that, and you take away, you know, sort of the triple lock pensions, then you actually, the government makes, according to this report from 2017, the government makes 14 billion a year from smokers. So there's a bit of push and pull, but what we do know is across the sin industries, as I like to call them, the revenue that's made from sin taxes is about £25 billion. That's across gambling, across alcohol, across tobacco. So it's 3% of total HMRC revenue from taxes. So it's a huge amount. These are huge numbers. We have been joined by our final panel guest, the Executive Director of Policy at the Tony Blair Institute, Wain. Thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry I'm late. I promise you, I told you in advance, but that doesn't make it any better.
So that's okay, you're forgiven. So when we're talking about, we've sort of gone through some of the highs and lows, and we did start talking about prevention and harm, and which I know is a big thing for the Tony Blair Institute. But what I really want to get into now is, so are there any other specific policy mechanisms that we can use that aren't just slapping taxes, they aren't just outpricing the working classes from having fun, because it does become, right, there's a certain point where the taxes become so high that a pint is unaffordable, so going to the pub is unaffordable, right? So there is a class question here, but there's been some success. So I work for the British Beer and Pub Association. We had alcohol duty reviews in 2023, and that sort of tapered down taxes based on ABV, and there's a small brewers relief, which is based on volume. So when we're talking about the sin tax, we obviously we can speak about harms, we can talk about the NHS, but I really want to speak now about local businesses. So I want to speak about what we can do to keep those corner shops open, to keep pubs open. Is it just taxing into oblivion, or is there a better roadmap out of this? I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
Yeah.
So look, I joined, and the tail end of the conversation seemed to be a data dump on why we make money from people smoking. And when I heard someone talk about early death being a way of the government making cash and that adding to the net benefit financially, I just thought, has our politics really descended into this? Because for me, if we are progressives, and I think progressivism should be a very broad church that runs right from blue through to new and everyone else in between, and some people on the left and right of us, then we've got to start standing for stuff. I go right back to the election 2024, right, where I think everything is grounded in the politics. People didn't vote for this government, let's be honest, but they did vote against decline and this pervasive sense that was all around them, that lives were getting worse, that high streets were getting worse. And I think that decline is visible. You don't need polls and focus groups to bring it to life. It's evident in the faces and spaces of the people all around us. And so for me, the job of this government, actually, they got the messaging right on that manifesto. One word, change. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to start changing this country for the better. And I think prevention is absolutely key to this. I believe in the dire fiscal straits that we find ourselves in. I think we've got to try and move on from us being a part in the movement that's obsessed with tax and spend and start thinking about how we grow the economy. But I also do think we need to think very carefully, intrinsically linked to that, about the quality of people's lives. They are getting worse, including in the working class communities that I'm proud to have come from. So at the Tony Blair Institute, We've been advocating for a preventative agenda. We painted that picture through data. The cost of obesity, for example, on the NHS now is over 100 billion quid, money that could be better spent, depending on your politics, on making people's lives more joyful or making people's lives more prosperous, or maybe both. But that's a lot of money, 100 billion quid. And so you asked about policy prescriptions. I was really proud to write a paper that I think was received well by government, but we're not moving at the speed that we really need to if you want to secure an election win next time around. It was called Protect Britain. And the idea was a very, very simple one, that we would build a preventative health service that sits outside and alongside the NHS. Now, it costs a little bit of money, but the best things in life often do, including if you pass it to a packet of cigarettes every now and again. It costs a little bit of money, but that the economical choice. But if you believe in Britain's future, then a commitment to the service that makes people's lives healthier and happier, brilliant. So Protect Britain, what would it do? Believe in technology and the role that can play in transforming people's lives at the Institute. Now, often a charge is laid at our door of being boring, technocrats and obsessed that AI can solve every problem. The answer is it can't. But technology, we're using it all now. I can see people on their phones interacting with people that would have been impossible 5, 10, 15 years ago. Technology is a matter of life, it's a way of life now. So Protect Britain would take that, it would take all of the data that we share probably every single day with often American-based companies. If you're wearing an Apple Watch, then your health data is going to someone somewhere to make them a lot of money. We share that with government in order for them to harness the insights and be able to make interventions or support us to make interventions in our own lives in order to improve them and address some of the problems that we've already got. And for me, it's a social justice thing, right? There are interventions, there are therapeutics, there are things that people can do that make them live longer, healthier lives. And they're done disproportionately by people who are wealthy and disproportionately by people from constituencies and communities who would never even think about voting Labour. And for me, the best thing that we can do is embrace this preventative agenda through this Protect Britain mechanism outside alongside the NHS and put it at the core of a Labour Party programme that starts to arrest and reverse that decline that swept us to power and transforms the country. Thank you.
Ryan, thank you. Really interesting, and I'm certainly excited for the jostle I can foresee between the two of you. So let's go to the lawmakers now. When we're talking about policy, is it just to prevent negative health outcomes from free choices that people make? Is the only way sort of out of that taxing them in higher and higher rates? Because, or are there other policy measures that we should be implementing? Is it about education? Is it about...
I'll briefly. So I think we need to make a distinction clear between like very addictive things that people might enjoy and things that are not addictive and can be quite social. And I think I would broadly put tobacco and alcohol in those two things. I know Maurice does enjoy smoking. My grandfather died of lung cancer in his early 60s.
So did mine.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And he, when he first started smoking, was not aware of the dangers because in that generation it wasn't a big problem. I've got two brothers that have recently quit smoking because it's become too expensive. And they now vape, which is fine. They enjoy that as well, but that's a much healthier choice than smoking tobacco, and they're likely to live longer lives because of it. So I think that there are things the tax system can do to help people make better decisions for their health without forcing them into those decisions. So you can still smoke a cigarette if you want to, but the tax system is incentivising you to move to something that's a little bit more healthy. The other thing that the government, I think, is legislating for at the moment is increasing the age when you can start to smoke. I forget the name of that particular policy. It was a Rishi Sunak policy. It's now a Labour policy.
Smoke-free generation.
That's what it's called. Yes, I should have learned that before this particular panel. But no, I think that's fantastic. I mean, everybody starts smoking when they're at school. So there are very few people, I think, who start smoking in their 20s. They pick up a habit very early in their careers.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're hooked. And they're hooked for the rest of their life on something that's very expensive, very damaging for their health. Stinks, frankly, and pubs smell much better now. There's no cigarettes in the pubs. And I think that's another sensible proposal. But I would not suggest any of those sorts of proposals for alcohol, which has a really social benefit. I enjoy going to the pub. immensely with my friends in my constituency. And we need to be careful about how the taxes affect different strengths of alcohol, of course, like more dangerous and less dangerous. But we need to maintain a system where not just working class people, but any people can go down the pub and can afford to have a beer and have a drink with their friends, and support those really important institutions.
Yeah, thank you. Couldn't agree more with that. David, would you like to sort of weigh in on this? Are there other alternatives to incentivise people to make healthier choices that perhaps is better in the long term for the state? Are there other alternatives than just a sort of flat taxes?
Yeah. Well, I think there is, and I mentioned at the start of this session about the government's NHS 10-year plan, very much what you said about moving from sickness to prevention. I think, what does that prevention look like though? And this is where the government needs to get that programme right to ensure that it genuinely provides an incentive and the tools for people to live a healthier life. So, some of the things I've heard of late is working with supermarkets, not mandating supermarkets to do things in a certain way, but encouraging supermarkets to promote healthier ways of eating, for example, discounts on healthier foods, and perhaps keeping the prices higher on the unhealthier foods, so that's not the government saying you have to do this. It's about encouraging supermarkets to take more responsibility about how they market foods, and then that's the choice of the consumer as to which way they want to go. And you are very right, when the price of cigarettes is going up, it does discourage people from wanting to smoke. So we need to look at how we can do that in other areas as well to encourage healthier lifestyles.
I'm always reminded when we speak about health outcomes like this that when I was in America once, I remember seeing sort of 2 litres of Coca-Cola, and that was cheaper than 2 litres of water. So I think there is an element about it's absolutely mad. So there is an element obviously about, and this when it comes into lower income families again, sometimes unhealthier food is cheaper, and that's a policy that if we do want better health outcomes more generally for society, then that's something that does need to be tackled and we do need to work on. Okay, audience, you've heard quite enough from me, and I'm very interested to hear from you. So do we have any questions? Yes, gentleman there.
Maybe you should do the asking.
Very well
AI's
timed.
already in control.
AI's back.
Brilliant.
So where to start now? So I'm Councillor Malcolm Clark from Lambeth, but I also am the Senior Prevention Policy Manager at Cancer Research UK. So I see things both on a local level and in fact I sit on my board of my strategic business improvement district, so I very much see things from a local and business level. I also see things from a health level as well. And I think that's my starting point is, while there's been quite a fun discussion, I guess, in the last few minutes, I think we just have to take a step back and go, first of all, why are we using textbook big tobacco messaging for things that harm our poorest communities the most? On alcohol, for instance, those on the lowest incomes may not drink the most, but they suffer the most harms. We actually now have, for instance, keep the positive side, a new tax regime rightly making a distinction between the on and off trade, same as the HFSS promotions restrictions that come in and new ones coming in October, not on excluding SMEs. So going back to, I guess, for me, one of the key questions here is how do we turn this landscape around so that we continue to promote, small businesses while ensuring that, those businesses are not the sources of, particularly in our poorest communities, the places where people end up going to get things that are harming their health. And that's the bottom line is these are health harming products and we have to get serious about them.
Thank you for that, Malcolm. Do you have a panellist in particular that you'd like to answer, or is it open to the panel? Open to the panel? Sounds like a bit of you, Ryan.
Yeah. I think the relationship between what we're talking about today and local place and class and the economy is actually critical, and I'm glad that we've alighted on that. And for me, it points to a few things. One is, and these are quite big subjects to grapple with, one is a complete market failure in parts of this country that have been completely neglected, not just by government, but by governments of all colours, by the way, but also by business and industry. And I think we need a serious plan for them. And I think about places which are very close to me. There's a place called Knowsley, not far from here. We know about Knowsley because there's no A-level provision, so you can't, it's the only constituency in the country where you can't do an A-level. But also, there's no supermarket, apart from one Morrison's, which opened up a couple of weeks back. This is a big, big place. I'm sure of all the places that we come from, we'd be shocked by that. And that, for me, you cannot leave that to the market. And there's a reason why it's got one of the lowest life expectancies in the country and why people are living unhealthy, often unhappy lives. I think we need to make a serious intervention, and I think it transcends this debate. I do think it is useful to make a distinction between taxes that change behaviour and then taxes that generate revenue. And I think we can be confident in our debate about what behaviours we want to change. And I have complete respect for those who think it's fine for people to smoke, but I fundamentally disagree with them because I think the harms are, I was going to say they're measurable, but no, the harms are measured in lives lost and costs, but I actually stop at lives lost and lives affected. It's grim, and we should do all that we can for progressives to try and change that. But I also think we should never see tobacco and these harmful products as a way of generating revenue, because we are just onto an absolute loser. There is something that sits above that, which is the economic decline. And I'm sometimes worried that our politics is becoming, how do we redistribute an ever dwindling pie, or how do we tax the hell out of it? And actually what is critical to everything today is growth. But again, it all circles back, because when you've got a workforce where, two stats, 1 in 4 people are out of it through ill health, 1 in 4 of our work age adults have a criminal record, you know that we've got some serious fundamental problems that we need to address. So our ambition should be growth, so that we can get to a point where we're lowering taxes, whilst also, in my view, making sure that we're moving people away from harmful products that exploit them. But we're lowering taxes and ultimately trying to improve people's quality of lives and making those interventions that I talked about before at a national level, protect Britain, but also some of those local interventions in places like Knowsley, which otherwise will just become a wasteland that we've neglected as a government and a movement.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from the audience? We'll go gentleman just over there.
Hello there. Corporate Affairs Director for Punch Clubs. We're one of the largest pub companies in the UK. The open question really, mainly to the MPs, but the horse racing industry recently launched an unprecedented day of strike action in response to the proposed changes in how online betting is taxed, claiming the reforms would be catastrophic for that sector. What's your view on whether we, the hospitality sector, would be any benefit in following suit and taking collective action to protest against what we see as unfair taxation?
Thank you, John. I think we'll go to Alex first.
Yeah, with that, thank you, John. I was at that strike day with the horse racing, with the jockeys and others. I think it unfortunately derived from a misunderstanding of the proposals. So there was sorry, going to be slightly boring and technical. There was a consultation put forward by the last government on harmonising the rates of taxation between different forms of gambling. That would have increased taxes on horse racing and kept online gambling taxes roughly the same. And that would have incentivised people and gambling companies, frankly, to push people towards the more harmful and profitable forms of gambling.
Right. That's it.
Yeah, which would have been
really involved with it.
Yeah, which would have been really, really damaging. So I oppose that. I think the opposite should happen. And I think the government is going to do something along those lines. Certainly, that's why 100 MPs signed a letter suggesting that. Should the hospitality industry go on strike? No, please don't. I know that you have advocates like David and I in Parliament that are fighting for a good business environment for SMEs like your members. A really good thing that's coming out of the budget this year, I've been told, is business rates review, which is going to lower business rates significantly for smaller premises versus larger levels of business rates for warehouses and other online operators that have an unfair competitive advantage. And I think that is going to be a big help, and we're listening very intently to the concerns that we have.
Thank you for that question and that answer, Alex. Do we have any other questions from the audience? I saw some hands go up.
Oh, there's a lady there.
Okay, we're just going to go to the lady at the back and then you're next.
Anne Johns, Budweiser Brewing Group, and really to pick up on some of the points that Ryan made around sort of prevention, and also how the tax element is getting a smaller and smaller pie. And I'm just thinking from the alcohol sector perspective, we've done a lot around alcohol harm, and in particular in terms of regulation. The Portman Group regulators really heavily to make sure that we don't advertise to young people, and also that people actually understand alcohol harm. So I'd just be interested in terms of the other sectors that you're talking about, what could they learn from us as a sector? Because I think we have moved the dial quite a lot in terms of kind of being responsible producers, essentially.
Would anyone particular like that? That's an open question for the panel.
Yeah,
David?
Well, I've already mentioned stuff supermarkets can do, for example, about being more responsible, about how they market and how they price their products to encourage healthier eating. That's one example. There's a lot of work being done in the online gambling space, but not enough, because too many people are still becoming addicted to gambling, and the impact that has on their mental health.
Absolutely.
Now, I am vice chair, currently about to become chair of the APPG for male suicide, and some of the statistics we see around people who get addicted to gambling and then end up taking their own life because they don't talk about it, they see that they've got themselves into a big hole, and we need, these companies need to take more responsibility around that and look at ways to prevent that happening, because once again we are talking about people's lives here. We are talking about men and women taking their, but predominantly men in the online gambling space, taking their lives far too soon, losing that potential of their future, and that's ultimately what this is why people need to take responsibility. This is why industries need to take responsibility for how they market, how they promote, how they use their products with their consumers.
Thank you for that question. Gentleman just here.
Hi there, I'm John Prince. I'm also in the alcohol industry, so you may be at risk of being surrounded by lobbyists. But I mean, I would second what Anne's just said about the work done.
So can you speak up a little bit?
I would second what my colleagues have said about the work done on our sector about responsible consumption. But I want to turn the question into what government should be doing. I'd like panelists to comment on how government can do better at moving to a data-driven and targeted interventions response rather than a one-size-fits-all policy. Because if you look at the statistics, 78% of people in this country drink with chief mental officer's guidelines.
Say that again?
78% of people drink with the CMO guidelines, which are 40 units a week. 4% drink about 30% of the units. Those are government figures. So you have a massive problem amongst a small group of addicts. You will not move addicts by price because they are addicted. You need targeted interventions and spending on dedicated treatment for them. How is the UK government going to move into that space where it looks much more at data, thinks about the economic effects of a one-size-fits-all policy, and actually targets help on those who really need it?
Thank you for that question. We'll go to Maurice first, and then if any of the panelists have something to say, then we can come to you afterwards. Maurice?
Yeah, just to say really thoughtful comments on the hook. I just wanted, that was a huge one because it seemed as if online gambling had the same status as going to the races, where, you know, having a flutter, go to the races, that's a great thing. This is where I want to talk about AI and what's going on. So my assumption is that the greatest cause of death is loneliness. This is what I think.
Loneliness.
Yeah. Isolation, and all the incentives are, I really respect you for what you're doing on the APPG, but my experience of life is this feeling of abandonment and loneliness that really drives, and that's also part of the 4% that you're talking about is, so what I think about AI, the potential of AI, is that we can have a more relational society. It can free up time and state reform. We've got to be serious about getting rid of the people who do the mundane emails. I think my analysis is that we could get rid of 60% of civil service jobs through AI, including doctors, lawyers and accountants. I think we should celebrate that, because then that will mean that people can go out and actually meet some people, not just
talk to their AI doctor.
Well, you don't talk, you write in, you say, they can do a diagnosis immediately rather than an overburdened GP having just 7 minutes to see you. Then the doctor can have half an hour and actually find out what the real problem is. More die of heartbreak. That's the reality of what you'll find in your APPG. Is that, so we've got to actually think like socialists about this, about how can we have a more relational society, how can we spend more time with those that we love and those that we don't, you know, so it's a huge, so this thing, if it's just about data, it's useless. If it's going to be a combination of data and targeting relational action, then that's the way, so we've got to find a way of accepting the modern reality here that the greatest cause of human pain is isolation. And the Labour approach has got to be to actually engage with far greater relational activity. And that's what's absent. I'm just saying.
Can I just build on that?
I just want to say, about, so, you know, Blue Labour, we say the last thing you want to hear when you go to the doctor is it's progressive. Okay? That's the problem, is that individual solutions, individual outcomes, we've got to be much more relational in how we engage with that, and then we'll have the right approach, I think.
Can I just build on that, because I think you're right, and if you leave technology to its own devices, i.e. you let it happen to us, I think it actually exacerbates the problem that you just said. People become lonely and isolated. We've seen this particularly with young lads.
People are terrified of AI when they should be embracing it as a liberating force.
But this is where the role of political leadership comes in, right? You've got to...
politics?
Yeah, we talk about, we use the verb harnessing. You've got to harness technology, which doesn't mean you just let it run riot across society and transform everything overnight. You've got to harness it, and part of that's education as well, which is really difficult because I don't think we're fully educated on this, but people like Maurice are helping with the conversation. But you harness it, and I think there is a future where you do start to not just automate tasks with it, but you're right, you do start to eliminate certain roles because you're actually solving problems that previously might. Now it's hard to get your head around that, but that is not. But that is not beyond the realms of possibility for the medium to long term. But I would say in the short to medium term, what we need to do again by harnessing it is to start to free up some of that space, and then we get to decide what we spend it on. I think our politics. And free up, hopefully spend as well. We get to decide what we spend, rather than just everything about tax and spend and take away from this service in order to give to that service, or make a cut here in order to take a penny off the tax rate here. I do think we need to free up fiscal headroom in order to start to invest in some of those spaces that you've talked about, which are dead, spaces where people do come together and start to build relationships, and we start to rebuild that sense of community. But at the moment, rightly or wrongly, I think that is seen as a luxury, and our politics just doesn't even get close to it. And if we do, we're probably then having a conversation about what's the tax rise that pays for it. I think we need to try and blow all of that apart, and I think technology has a role to play in it.
Thank you. Someone from the right side of the room. Oh, we've got loads, a flurry of hands. Great. We're going to go to this gentleman all the way on the right first.
I just I'm a very bad person, but I have to go. I just really thank you for having me.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
Nice to meet
and
you.
Can I join your APPG? I mean, that's really
100%.
That's huge. And
Getting into the country in the first place.
And it's probably worth mentioning that that's the kind of thing the tobacco industry would say, isn't it?
Declaration of interest. Okay, so we had 2 hands up. We'll take those very, very quickly, please. Very quick questions, and we'll do very, very quick answers.
Hi,
Hi, Harry from the Food and Drink Federation. I just wanted to ask if the panel agreed with me that there's a really distinct difference between alcohol and gambling and tobacco and food. We all eat food every day. Food inflation set to reach nearly 6% by Christmas. It's going to hit the poorest people the hardest, and adding additional taxes onto food is actually not going to be helpful to anyone. And we could actually be reformulating and supporting business in reformulating. We've dropped calories, sugar, salt by loads over the past few years. Business are working really hard to do that, and I think that's really the answer when it comes to food.
Okay, we'll take them both at the same time, actually.
Hello, I'm Alex. I'm a PhD researcher. I just want to commend the panel for actually talking about the society we want to live in. I don't feel like we hear that enough from politicians, and I disagree with Lord Glasman about a lot of things, but something he always does is talk about the society that he wants to see, and Blue Labour is very good at that.
Yeah.
And I don't see it a lot from leadership, from politicians in general, so how do we talk about that a lot more in terms of how we want society to function, not just the tax and spend, which I agree with as well.
Right, who wants last question first?
I'm
Happy?
I'm happy to go with the food question. if
Food,
that's okay.
let's go.
Very briefly, I think we need to be careful how we look at the pricing of food. Yes, food has gone up and has been increasing in price. That doesn't mean that you can't price more riskier foods higher than more healthier foods. We also need to look at the EU trade deal, which once it comes in, will start to push food prices down again. So yes, we're in a bit of a challenging situation at the moment with food prices, but the long-term outlook is that food prices will start to fall.
And I was quite pleased to see that the sugar tax resulted in a lot of that reformulation. So the industry didn't actually have to pay the taxes on consumers because the soft drink suddenly got much less sugar involved, and people didn't really tell the difference. So it's not always the answer is to put the prices up. On the what sort of society do we want to live in question, we should talk about it more. I think absolutely we are progressives, as Ryan was saying. I would like to see less people smoking in the country. I'm very happy to say that, and that is one of the proposals. Why we were talking about all these different types of taxes. I would also like to see less people with alcohol addiction, less people with gambling addiction, and this is the reason we discuss all of these issues. And you see a lot of the consequences, and as MPs, we all see a lot of the consequences of those addictions in our constituencies and our surgeries. But being better at explaining that, I think, is something we will take you up on.
Can I make one final
Very,
point as well?
very
briefly.
briefly.
One thing we've not spoken about today is education, and education at a young age. So I think with our curriculum review that's currently happening, we should hear more about it later this year. We've got a real opportunity to address some of these public health issues very early on with young people in school.
Well, and that's all we've got. Sorry, Ryan, to deny your last word. That's all we've got time for, folks. Thank you for joining us today on this panel, talking about the sin tax, and thank you to my wonderful MPs over to my right, and also our Executive Director of Politics at the Tony Blair Institute, Ryan, on my left.
Thank you.